I am finally in Jerusalem. All my life I've longed for this day. Growing up in exile in Babylon, I'd heard many descriptions of Zion, the holy city on the side of the hill. The heart of every Israelite ached for the right to return to this land of our heritage. It was 14 years ago when Ezra led an expedition of about 1,800 people from Babylon to Jerusalem. I remember standing at the gates of Susa, one of the capital cities, weeping as my countrymen marched out. My tears had mingled meanings. While it's true that I was sad that I wasn't allowed to go, it was also the case that I was ecstatic that so many of my kinsmen could return to the promised land. My last hug was reserved for my brother Hanani. When he left, I wondered if I would ever see him again. 6 months ago, my brother returned, and again I wept. This time, my tears contained no joy or excitement, for the news that he brought was tragic. The people were living in constant danger and disgrace. The walls that had been torn down 150 years ago were still scattered rubble, and charred pieces of wood were the only evidence of the once mighty gates. The people had no protection. They lived in constant fear of raids by their marauding neighbors. They also lived in shame. It's been said that a city without locked gates and lofty walls is no city at all. Jerusalem was the punchline of many a joke. I questioned Hanani and his companions way into the night. And as I collected further details, a burden for these people grew heavy in my mind. Their need became my passion. For days I mourned, fasted, and prayed. It was in my prayers that I shared my burden with God. With confidence in His greatness and unfailing promises, I confessed the sins of my people and asked for His restoration and help. It was in those prayer meetings that God showed me that I was to become involved in rebuilding the walls. But how could I thought, with my position with King Artaxerxes locking me in Susa? Despite this giant obstacle, I continued to pray and plan for the day when God would open the door. And 4 months later, God's gracious hand touched the king's heart, and my mission began. The group that went back with me was quite different than Ezra's. We had far fewer people. We didn't transport a lot of valuables. And unlike his expedition, we had a military escort. It was something the king insisted on. Because of our streamlined nature, we took a shorter route. We cut through Damascus to Tadmor and then followed the Jordan Valley to Jericho, and then beeline to Jerusalem. When I said it was a shorter route, I didn't mean that it was a short trip. It wasn't. It took 2 long, grueling months. I'm not complaining. I needed those months to prepare. Prepare for what? For today. In an hour, I'm going to be meeting with my fellow Israelites. Pray for me, because I'm going to try to motivate them to join me in the gigantic task of rebuilding the walls. As you may have discovered, motivation isn't always an easy task. People hate to commit themselves to hard jobs, especially when there are other things to do, and there are always other things to do. It is crucial that I approach them in the right way. As I thought about what I could say, my mind wandered back to the events that got me motivated to be involved with this project. There were 3 factors, really. The negative news that I had heard burdened me with a problem that the Jerusalem residents were facing. Secondly, God showed me that the only solution was to rebuild the walls. And finally, He made it obvious that His gracious hand would make the solution possible. And since those were the factors that motivated me, I'm going to try to stress them to the people and hope that they too will feel a compulsion to get involved. First, I will try to let them see the need that exists. When I was told about the danger and disgrace that Jerusalem is under, I became burdened about the situation. In order for my heartache to be contagious, I must adequately communicate this same problem. Yesterday, I did the research necessary for my words to have credibility. Only a poor leader shirks doing his homework. It was necessary that I see the situation for myself. So late last night, while the rest of the city was sleeping, I and some companions quietly inspected the condition of the walls. I'd observed the northern wall on my way into Jerusalem, and I've studied the western wall from my residence in the southwestern part of the city. So last night, I restricted my moonlight evaluation to the southern and eastern walls. We went out of the valley gate into the valley of Hinnom. We then turned left and worked our way along the south gate. I couldn't believe the devastation that I saw when I got to the dung gate. The stones that had made up the wall were strewn everywhere, and the gates were completely consumed. As we kept going, the scenario only got worse. Near the King's Pool and the Fountain Gate, the rubble was piled so high I couldn't even get my horse through. It is this awful situation that has placed us in the calamity and shame that I must verbally picture for the people today. It's only after they have caught a burden for the needs of our people that I will then lead them to the second point, which is, well, I'm going to show them a plan that will solve the problem. In some situations, a plan is not obvious. In this case, however, the only solution is to rebuild the walls. I won't pretend that this will be an easy job. It will not be. For 150 years, no one has been able to restore the protective barriers. But now, we've got to try. Some leaders try to recruit volunteers by an attempt to persuade them that the work is easier than it really is. This is not only dishonest, it's also unwise. There is an element deep in the human spirit that is stimulated by big challenges. It is that element that I must touch. Third, I cannot go to the other extreme and make the challenge impossible to reach. They must see that the project is attainable. This particular task can be accomplished for only one reason, and that's this: because God is with us. To convince the Israelites of this fact, I will tell them of how God's gracious hand has been upon me and how He has already moved in mighty ways. I'll tell them about how God changed the heart of the king. I'll tell them about the resources that we were provided. I'll tell them about the guards that came along. I'll tell them how God has been active. Well, that's the plan. Will it work? You know what? I think it will. If you show God's people a problem, a plan, and His provisions, they will want to get involved. And now you must excuse me. I must make my way over to where the people will gather.